Was your family unusual in that sense? I mean, was it a...
No, I don't think it was unusual for Washington, because in the block where I lived, just about everyone owned their home. Now, whether it was grandparents or whether the grandparents lived with their children, you had pretty much 3 generations represented there. And again, I'm speaking of the Depressions. Now, my father worked for a fruit and vegetable company that delivered to hotels and restaurants and so forth. And he worked 6 days a week. Went in early on Saturday, earlier than usual, and if he was lucky, he got off around noon. If he wasn't lucky, he could be there to 10, 11 at night. No extra pay. And when he came home, there were people waiting, because he was allowed to bring whatever was left over, because it wasn't going to keep until Sunday. His employer did this consciously. And
so whatever vegetables...
Whatever was available was handed out. And the people there knew what the needs were. So there was never any argument over who got what. And of course it made my dad feel pretty good too, very careful.
So these were people in the neighborhood, or relatives, or
yes,
whatever, who would come.
There were people in the neighborhood
to your house and be there, hoping that when your father came, there would be something to distribute.
Right.
I think that most people, certainly young people, have very little sense of how terrible the Depression was.
Yes.
And the idea of people that you knew, or strangers, having to come and, in essence, beg sometimes.
Yes. Well, not just sometimes. Actually, I remember this very well. I was always with my grandmother, of course. My parents worked. My mother worked in the laundry, pressed clothes. And then later, during World War II, she did get a job as a clerk in the War Department. But I was there with my grandmother all day before school. And, of course, my aunts and my uncle were off school. And I recall grown men knocking on the back door and asking for a slice of bread. And if my grandmother saw that there was a wife or some kids there, she would give them a slice of bread for each of the people there. Now, interestingly enough, she made bread for her family every day. I tell my wife this all the time. Cornbread, whatever, rolls. But this fellow would take that bread, go over, share it with his family, come back. And my grandmother had a pail with some soapy water and a squeegee and some newspapers. And the fellow would wash that window beside the back door. And one day I noticed that 5 different people had washed that same window. And I kept jerking on my grandmother's apron. I said, but Mother Shepherd, that's what we called it, it's clean. All those other men have washed it. She says, I know that, and they know it too. But they want to show you that they appreciate it, and they don't want to take anything for nothing. And that's the best that they can do, that they can offer. And I appreciate it. So I've never forgotten that.
It was for their dignity and pride.
Exactly. You have to have dignity. Now, there was no welfare then. No one was going to pay the bill. You took care of your family. And all of these houses, there were about 5 apartment buildings in that block. But I knew everyone in the block by name and possibly age and something about them.